I was the last to know. That's the part that eats me alive. Everyone else knew, her friends, her coworkers, maybe even our neighbors. They all knew and they all said nothing. And I was walking around like a blind man, smiling, kissing her goodnight, making her coffee in the morning while she laughed at me behind my back. It started unraveling the night of the party. A house party, casual but expensive, thrown by one of Emily's friends from work. I wasn't even supposed to go. I had planned to stay home, watch a game, relax. But she insisted. She wanted me there. Looking back, I see why. She wanted me to be the fool in the room. I should have known something was off the moment we arrived. The way people looked at me. Quick glances, awkward smiles, some even avoiding my eyes altogether. And Emily? She was electric, buzzing. She practically floated through the crowd, laughing too hard, touching people too much. Not me, though. Never me. Then there was him. Tall, smug, standing too close. I didn't know his name, but I knew his type. The way he leaned in when she spoke, the way her hand rested lightly on his arm as she laughed. It was intimate, practiced, familiar. My stomach turned, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I lost her. 1 second, she was in the kitchen, pretending I didn't exist. The next, she was gone. I scanned the room, checked the backyard, even peeked into the garage. Nothing. But when I asked around, the room got quieter. People suddenly found their drinks fascinating. That's when I saw it. A friend of a friend, some guy I barely knew, giving me that look. Pity. That unbearable, suffocating look of someone who knows something you don't. I walked up to him, heart pounding. Where is she? He hesitated, opened his mouth, closed it. And that was all the answer I needed. I didn't walk. I didn't run. I moved through that house like a storm, shoving open doors, not caring who saw. Bathroom empty. Spare bedroom empty. And then the door was locked. Soft laughter. Low voices. I knocked. Once. Twice. Silence. Then the door opened and there she was. Emily. My wife. Hair slightly messy, lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth. And behind her, him, his shirt untucked, looking at me like I was an inconvenience. Like I was interrupting. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember if I said anything at all. Because in that moment, nothing mattered. Not the years together. Not the memories. Not the vows. She had betrayed me. Cruelly. Publicly. And the worst part? She didn't even look sorry. She didn't flinch. Didn't stammer. Didn't scramble for an excuse. She just stood there, staring at me like I was an idiot for even showing up. Like I was the problem. Behind her, he had the audacity to smirk. Not a full grin, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, like this was amusing to him. Like he was enjoying the show. My fists clenched at my sides, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of losing control. Emily sighed, rolling her eyes. Jesus, Mark? Don't be so dramatic. Dramatic. That's what she called it. Like I had walked in on her sneaking a cigarette instead of catching her alone in a locked room with another man. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. How long? Why? Do you even love me anymore? But I didn't trust myself to speak. I didn't trust that I wouldn't snap, that my voice wouldn't crack, that I wouldn't humiliate myself even further in a house full of people who already knew more about my marriage than I did. So I just stared at her. Stared at the woman I had built my life around, the woman I would have done anything for, and I waited. Waited for an explanation. A lie. A confession. Something. She exhaled sharply, folding her arms. You're embarrassing yourself. Let's go home and talk like adults. Home. As if there was still a home to go back to. As if she hadn't burned it down the second she stepped into that room with him. I shook my head. No, I said, my voice steady. You talk now. Her expression flickered just for a second. Annoyance. Maybe even panic. She wasn't used to me pushing back. She was used to getting her way, to twisting things until she was the victim and I was the unreasonable one. But not this time. She scoffed. You're acting like she stopped herself. But it was too late. She knew she couldn't deny it. Not when I had seen her like that. Not when he was still standing there, arms crossed, watching this unfold like it was some kind of soap opera. I turned to him. You should leave, I said flatly. He didn't move. Emily let out a short, bitter laugh. You don't get to tell people what to do. I looked at her. Looked at him. Then I turned and walked away. Not because I was giving up. Not because I was weak. But because I knew if I stayed, if I let this moment drag on, I would say something, do something that I couldn't take back. But this wasn't over. Not even close. I walked out of that room, out of that house, into the night air that felt too thick to breathe. My hands were shaking, my pulse hammering so hard in my ears that the sounds of the party faded into nothing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. Not yet. Right now, all I felt was cold. This wasn't just some mistake. This wasn't something she could spin into a misunderstanding. Emily had locked herself in a room with another man at a party full of our mutual friends, knowing anyone could walk in and find them. And she didn't care. She wanted to be caught. That thought sank into me like a rusted nail. I had spent years thinking I knew her, that I understood how her mind worked. But this was something else. This was calculated. I made it to my car and leaned against the door, staring down at my phone. My first instinct was to call someone. Who? My brother? One of my friends? My mother? And say what? Hey, guess what? My wife just humiliated me in front of an entire party. Yeah, it turns out I've been a blind idiot for God knows how long. No. Instead, I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and did the one thing she never expected me to do. I went back inside. The party was still going, though there was a shift in the air now. Some people were still laughing, drinking, pretending nothing had happened. Others whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting toward me as I moved through the house. They had all seen. They had all known. And then I saw her, Emily, standing in the kitchen, sipping from a red cup like nothing had happened, like she wasn't standing in the wreckage of our marriage. She saw me coming inside, like I was some annoying inconvenience. I told you we could talk at home, she said, voice low, almost scolding. I didn't lower mine. How long? She blinked. What? How long? She smirked, shaking her head. Oh my God, Mark, not here. Here, I said. Right now. Something shifted in her expression. Something cold, calculating. And then she smiled. Actually smiled. All right, she said, setting down her drink. Since you're so desperate to make a scene, she leaned in, close enough that only I could hear. For months, she whispered. And it's been amazing. The room tilted. For months. While I had been kissing her goodnight, making her coffee, planning trips, buying her flowers. For months of her lying to my face, smiling at me, touching him. She pulled back, tilting her head like she was waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled right back. And that's when she hesitated. Because she expected a meltdown, a desperate plea, a fight. But she wasn't going to get any of that. Because I had just made my decision. And Emily? She was about to find out what it felt like to lose. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as Emily's smirk flickered just for a second. She was waiting for me to break. To yell, to beg, to ask why? But I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I turned and walked away. Not out of weakness. Not because I didn't have a plan. But because, for the first time in this entire marriage, I had the upper hand. She expected a scene. She expected me to embarrass myself, to lash out and confirm whatever story she had already told her friends about me. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I left the party without another word. The bass from the music still thudding behind me as I stepped into the night. I wasn't running away. I was strategizing. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The house was dark, quiet. Our house, the one I had worked my ass off to afford. The one I had built a life in, where I had planned a future with a woman who didn't even respect me enough to be discreet about her betrayal. I walked straight to our bedroom, opened her closet, stared at the neatly arranged rows of clothes, shoes, purses, the life she had curated for herself using my effort, my sacrifices. Then I got to work. I packed every single thing she owned into trash bags. I didn't care what it was, designer dresses, expensive perfume, sentimental gifts. It all went into the bags. Every drawer emptied, every hanger stripped. By the time I was done, our bedroom looked like I had erased her from it entirely. And then, just as I was tying up the last bag, I heard the front door open. Emily walked in like she hadn't just shattered our marriage hours ago, like she hadn't whispered 4 months into my ear with that smug little smile. She kicked off her shoes, tossed her purse onto the counter, and stretched like she was just coming home from a long day at work. Then she saw me. And the bags. She stopped mid-step. What the hell is this? I didn't answer, just picked up one of the bags and dropped it at her feet. She frowned. Mark, what are you? Get out. She actually laughed. Excuse me? You heard me. I gestured to the bags. Your things are packed. You can go now. She blinked, and for the first time that night, I saw it. The crack in her confidence. The first sliver of doubt. She had spent 4 months disrespecting me, humiliating me, treating me like I was disposable. But she had never once considered that I might be the one to leave. Mark, she sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. You're being ridiculous. You're upset. Let's talk about this like adults. That was the thing about Emily. She always thought she could talk her way out of anything. But not this time. I crossed my arms. Talk? Like how you talked with him for the past 4 months. She rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. Like I was the unreasonable one. Oh my God. Are you really going to throw everything away over one mistake? One mistake. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Emily, you bragged about it. You smiled while you told me. And now you want to act like it was just some little accident. She scoffed. Okay, you need to calm down. You're acting insane. There it was. The manipulation. The gaslighting. The same tactics she had probably used 100 times before on me, on others. But it wasn't going to work. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. I want you out of my house. Tonight. She shook her head, folding her arms. I'm not going anywhere. I smiled. Then you won't mind when I change the locks in the morning. For the first time, real panic flickered in her eyes. You wouldn't. Watch me. She stared at me, waiting for me to break, to give in. But I just stood there, calm, steady, because I knew something she didn't. I was already free. Emily's confidence was cracking. I could see it in the way she shifted her weight, in the way her eyes darted to the bags, then back to me, trying to calculate her next move. She had spent months treating me like an afterthought, like a backup plan, like I was too weak to do anything about what she was doing behind my back. But now she was realizing she had miscalculated. She folded her arms. Mark, you're not thinking clearly. I let out a short laugh. No, Emily. For the first time in months I am. Her eyes narrowed. You can't just kick me out. This is my house too. No, I said, stepping closer, my voice deadly calm. It's my house. Your name isn't on the mortgage. You don't pay the bills. You don't even work. So no, Emily. This is not your house. Her jaw tightened. I could see the realization sink in. I wasn't playing. I wasn't bluffing. She tried a different approach. Her voice softened, her expression shifting to something almost regretful. Okay, I get it. You're hurt. And maybe I haven't been fair to you. I let out another humorless laugh. You haven't been fair to me? That's what you call sneaking around with some guy while I was at home being your goddamn husband. She sighed. I don't love him, Mark. Wow, that makes me feel so much better, I said, clapping my hands together. So, what, he was just some fun little distraction? You were just bored. She hesitated. That told me everything. I shook my head. You know what? I don't care. I don't care why you did it. I don't care about him. I care about the fact that you had no respect for me. You didn't even bother hiding it. She took a step closer, reaching for my arm, but I stepped back. She sighed, annoyed. Look, I messed up. Okay? But throwing me out like this is ridiculous. No, Emily, I said, my voice like ice. What's ridiculous is that you thought I'd just take it. That you thought I'd just keep playing the fool while you laughed at me behind my back. She rolled her eyes again. But this time, I saw something behind it. Nervousness. She was losing control of the situation, and she hated it. I have nowhere to go, she said, like it was my problem. Not my problem, I shot back. She let out a bitter laugh. So that's it? You're just done. I tilted my head. Weren't you done 4 months ago? That shut her up. I pointed to the bags. You can take them and leave, or I can throw them onto the lawn and lock the door behind you. Your choice. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me like she didn't recognize me. Like she couldn't believe this was happening. But finally, she grabbed the bags, her movement stiff, her expression cold. She stomped toward the door, yanking it open. But before she walked out, she turned back, her eyes full of something bitter and ugly. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I smiled. No, Emily. You are. And then she was gone. And for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. The moment the door slammed shut behind her, the silence swallowed me whole. It was the kind of silence that should have felt lonely. Empty. But it didn't. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt at peace. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. Just letting it sink in. Emily was gone. The weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying, the constant suspicion, the second-guessing, the feeling that something was off, was gone with her. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. All that was left was a cold, clear realization. She had never expected this outcome. Emily thought she had me figured out. She thought I'd break, that I'd beg, that I'd be the one chasing her, that she could keep lying, keep playing her little games, and that I'd always be waiting for her when she was done. But now she was the one left outside, holding trash bags full of her own betrayal. I walked over to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to see her standing in the driveway. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. She was on her phone, pacing, her free hand gesturing wildly as she talked. Probably calling one of her friends to complain, to spin the story into something where she was the victim. Maybe she was even calling him. Pathetic. I didn't care. I let the curtain fall and turned away. Emily wasn't my problem anymore. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the couch, letting my body sink into the cushions. And for the first time in years, I just sat there in my own home without feeling like a stranger in it. But I wasn't stupid. Emily wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And I was right. Because 20 minutes later, the text started. First, it was, "Mark, we need to talk." Then, "This is ridiculous. I can't believe you're acting like this." Then, "You're throwing away our marriage over one mistake?" And finally, when I didn't respond, the real Emily started to show. "You ungrateful bastard. After everything I've put up with from you?" There it was. The shift. The desperation twisting itself into anger, into blame. Because she couldn't accept that I wasn't playing along anymore. I put my phone down. Let her scream into the void. I wasn't going to block her. No. That was too easy. Let her stew in it. Let her sit with the fact that she lost. She had spent months betraying me. Now, she could spend a little time realizing she had no power over me anymore. The next morning, I woke up to 43 unread messages. Emily had gone through every possible stage overnight. Begging, guilt-tripping, raging, gaslighting. The woman had sent entire paragraphs about how I was ruining our marriage over something so small, how I was overreacting, how she had been unhappy for a long time and that I was the reason she did what she did. And when that didn't work, she flipped the script. Her last few texts were straight-up venom. "You're going to regret this. You think you're so much better than me? You're nothing without me." There it was. The real her. The version she had been hiding behind fake apologies and manipulations. I didn't reply. Instead, I got out of bed, made myself a coffee, and opened my laptop. It was time to make sure Emily never had a way back into my life again. First, I pulled up my bank accounts. We never had joined accounts, thank God, but she was still listed as an authorized user on one of my credit cards. That ended in 5 minutes. Next, I called a locksmith. The guy was at my house before noon, changing every single lock. While he worked, I went through everything. Every drawer, every shelf, every closet. Anything that belonged to Emily and had somehow escaped my late-night purge? Out. By the time I was done, there was no trace of her left in the house. And then, just as I was hauling the last bag of her stuff out to the garage, my phone rang. "Emily." I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to answer. I almost let it go to voicemail. But then a thought crossed my mind. She thought she still had control. It was time to make sure she knew she didn't. I picked up. She didn't even wait for me to speak. "Oh, so you finally decided to stop being a child and talk?" I smiled. "Hey, Emily. You left some stuff behind. I packed it up for you. It's in the garage. You can pick it up today between 2 and 4. After that, it goes to the curb." Silence. Then a low, disbelieving laugh. "You're joking." "Nope," I said, checking the time. "You've got 3 hours. She scoffed. "Mark, I don't have a way to not my problem." "Jesus Christ, Mark, you are acting insane." 2 to 4, Emily, I repeated. "Take it or leave it." She lost it. She screamed, she swore, she called me every name in the book. And you know what I did? I hung up. I went inside, sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and then I laughed. Because for the first time in our entire relationship, I had all the power. At exactly 2:47 p.m. she showed up. I was watching from the living room window when her car pulled into the driveway. She was alone. No surprise visit from him. Maybe she was smart enough to know that bringing her affair partner here would be a bad idea. Or maybe he had already bailed now that the fun was over. Either way, I didn't care. She sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. Her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. Good. Let her sit in it. Let her stew in the mess she made. When she finally stepped out, I almost didn't recognize her. The confident, smug woman from last night was gone. Her hair was thrown into a messy bun. Her face was bare. And for the first time in forever, she wasn't dressed to impress. She looked small. She walked up to the garage, pausing when she saw the bags. 7 trash bags, lined up neatly against the wall, stuffed with everything she had left behind. I didn't go out to greet her. I didn't help. I just watched. She stood there for a moment, staring at the bags like they physically hurt her. Then, slowly, she pulled out her phone. A second later, mine buzzed on the table. "Emily, can we just talk, please?" I smiled, ignored the text, kept watching. She shifted on her feet, checking her phone every few seconds like she expected me to cave. When I didn't, she let out a heavy sigh and crouched down, starting to gather the bags. She struggled. I knew she would. I had packed them tight, stuffing everything I could into each one. She could barely lift 2 at a time, let alone all 7. She tried dragging them to the trunk of her car, but the bags were heavy and the pavement wasn't kind. One tore open slightly and a couple of her shirts spilled out onto the ground. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of my drink, and waited. Another buzz. "Emily, you're really just going to watch me struggle?" "Me, yes." I saw her jaw clench as she read the message. She looked up at the window, straight at me, but I didn't move. For a moment, I thought she was going to break. That she was going to walk up to the front door and start pounding on it, screaming, demanding I let her in so she could twist this into something that made her the victim. But instead, she did something that almost made me laugh. She picked up her phone and called someone. I didn't need to guess who. 5 minutes later, another car pulled up. Not his, someone else. A friend. A woman I recognized but had never cared enough to learn her name. The woman got out, took one look at the bags and made a face. Even her own friend looked embarrassed for her. Together, they loaded the rest of her things into the trunk. It took another 5 minutes. And then, finally, she was gone. No dramatic speech. No final words. She just drove away. And I stood up, stretched, and for the first time in years, I felt light. The moment she was gone, I stepped outside. The driveway was empty, but she had left something behind. One of her shirts, crumpled on the pavement, half dragged under her car tire. I stared at it for a long second before calmly walking over, picking it up, and tossing it straight into the trash bin. That was the last piece of Emily that would ever exist in my home. I turned back to the house that finally felt like mine. No ghosts of her presence. No more walking on eggshells. No more faking smiles while she lived a double life. And yet, I knew this wasn't the end. Emily wasn't done. I saw it in her eyes before she left. That cold, calculating expression that told me her brain was already working overtime to figure out how to make this my fault. She had lost this battle, but she wasn't the type to accept defeat. And I was right. Because by 8 p.m., my phone started lighting up again. First, a text from an unknown number. "I can't believe you're doing this to Emily." Then another. "She's devastated. You should at least talk to her." And another. "Dude, whatever she did, she's still your wife. You can't just throw her away like trash." I sighed, shaking my head. She was already running damage control. Already twisting the story. Already playing the poor, abandoned wife, painting herself as the victim to anyone who would listen. But I had been prepared for this. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I opened the group chat with my friends and family, the people who actually mattered, and I sent one simple message. "Hey, everyone. Just a heads up, Emily and I are done. She cheated on me for 4 months. I caught her. I kicked her out. If she tries to spin it any other way, don't believe a word of it." I hit send and let the truth do its work. Almost immediately, replies started flooding in. "What? Dude, are you serious? That's insane. We're with you 100%. She's a piece of trash, man. You did the right thing." One by one, people backed me. People who had known Emily. People who had liked her. And yet, the moment the truth was out, there wasn't a single person defending her. Because no one respects a liar. Then, after a full hour of silence, Emily finally texted me again. "Wow. Really? You're trying to turn people against me now?" I smirked, picked up my phone. "No, Emily. I'm just making sure they know the truth before you can twist it." A pause. Then, "Emily, I hope you're happy." I am. And for the first time in years, I really, truly was. A week passed. A week without Emily's voice in my house. Without her fake apologies. Without her walking around like she still owned a part of me. A week of silence. Of peace. And then, just when I thought she had finally given up, she came back. Not physically. No, she wasn't stupid enough to show up at my house after everything. But she tried one last move. One last desperate attempt to claw her way back into my life. I woke up to an email from her. Subject: "Please read this." I almost ignored it. Almost deleted it without opening it. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe the need to see just how low she was willing to sink, made me click. And there it was. A long, drawn-out, pitiful excuse of a letter. It started with, "I know I made mistakes, but..." Because of course it did. Then came, "I was lost, I was confused, I didn't know what I wanted." Then the guilt-tripping. "I miss you. I miss what we had. Can't we at least talk?" And finally, the most pathetic part, "I still love you. I think a part of me always will." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because she still didn't get it. This wasn't a game. This wasn't me trying to punish her. This wasn't me being petty. This was freedom. I didn't respond. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I did something better. I forwarded the email to myself just to have it as a reminder of exactly who she was. Then I blocked her email the same way I had already blocked her number. And then I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked away from her for good. No more looking back. No more wondering why she did it. No more asking myself if I could have done something different. I was done. And Emily? She was nothing more than a bad memory.